Hi, this is my second episode in the origins of life on Earth from molecules to cells. And in this episode, we're going to talk about biological molecules that actually make up life as we know it today. I'm going to start by taking a look at a modern bacterial cell to understand what is this life that we're talking about, that we're trying to understand how it arose. So this is a bacterial cell structure that shows the different biological molecules, where they are in the cell, and a bit about what their role is. And we're going to go into that a little bit deeper in a few minutes as well. So the DNA within the cell makes up the genome, the instructions for building a cell. RNA is copies of individual genes that are made into proteins. That RNA and proteins make up the ribosome, and these are the workhorses of the cell. They make all of the proteins, which are actually the functional unit of cells, in that they're enzymes or molecular machines. They can also be structural in the sense that they can make up flagella and pili and other structures of the cell. But the main role of proteins is to create other molecules. It's to carry out enzymatic reactions as well as create other molecules such as DNA, RNA, and lipids, which make up the cell membrane, as well as carbohydrates, which make up the cell wall. So we can see that this is all of the biological molecules that are consistent across all domains of life that we know. So to go over a little bit about what we're talking about in this episode, we're going to talk about biological molecules as the building blocks of life, the central dogma of biology, some hypotheses on how life started, and what was needed for molecules to build into life, as well as the challenges in studying this in early Earth. So different types of molecules are needed for all life. All life contains nucleotides, DNA and RNA, amino acids or proteins, lipids as membranes, and sugars as carbohydrates. These individual molecules serve as the building blocks for larger biological molecules. In the case of DNA and RNA, they're encoded by nucleotides that come together as building blocks to create the DNA or RNA larger molecule. Proteins are the molecular enzymatic catalysts. These carry out the metabolism of the cell and build all of the other molecules there. The individual building blocks are amino acids that link together in chains that then fold up into a tertiary structure to have a complex structure that is a molecular machine that then catalyzes the metabolic reactions and builds the other proteins. Lipids form semipermeable membranes or compartments. Lipids have are mostly hydrophobic and stack together to form membranes. They have a polar head group that will interact with water, but because of the hydrophobic chains, they all stack together to create these structures that are referred to as micelles or liposomes, which is kind of a two-sided internal compartment, as well as phospholipid bilayers or just lipid bilayers. And these membranes serve to separate different chemical environments that then can facilitate energy gradients. We'll see a little bit more in the next lecture. Carbohydrates are a structural element of the cell wall and may act as energy storage as well. They're individual sugar molecules that are linked together to form polysaccharides. And the central dogma of biology is that DNA stores the information and is replicated to keep that information intact. Then individual pieces of that information are copied to the RNA, which then is transcribed into then is transcribed into proteins that actually are responsible for making DNA and RNA and lipids and carbohydrates. So really it's the DNA replicates using these molecular machines or proteins, then the RNA is made from the DNA using molecular machines, and the proteins are assembled based on the DNA instructions using molecular machines, and other molecules are made by using molecular machines. So you can see there's a little bit a chicken and the egg problem, where how did this all come together when it's all reliant, every piece of it is reliant on every other piece. But we know that all life that we know adheres to that dogma. So we're going to take a look a little bit more at some of these molecules, and in the next lecture explore how some of this could have come about. There's two hypotheses around how these molecules, these complex levels of molecules originated. The first one is the panspermia hypothesis, where life originated on another planet, such as Mars, and was transferred to Earth via an asteroid. This supposes that those cells or early life would have had to survive ejection from the initial planet that they lived on, survive space, as well as surviving entry into Earth. And while there's some ideas around this, there's not a lot of evidence. The abiogenesis hypothesis is that life arose on Earth from simple molecules and gradually increased in complexity to generate complex organisms. And I would say that there's probably more evidence for this that we know today. Then there's a couple hypotheses that kind of fall under this, which is the idea of an RNA world, that RNA was one of the first molecules of life because it can replicate itself, and it also can form tertiary structures that can carry out simple enzymatic reactions similar to proteins. And we're going to talk again a little bit more about that in the next lecture. We also have systems chemistry, which suggests a heterogeneous mixtures of molecules and building blocks with DNA and RNA hybrids and maybe some RNA protein hybrids that allow many different reactions to occur. And we'll explore that again a little bit further tomorrow. But looking at the overall abiogenesis hypothesis, to study this, we have to bring together many different disciplines from molecular biology to paleontology, astrobiology, oceanography, biophysics, geochemistry, and biochemistry, to name a few. So it's a very interdisciplinary area of study. And what we want to look at from that is, and what all those research look at, is really what aspects would this emergent life need to incorporate? What characteristics would these molecules that would make up life need? They would need to have information storage and self-replication, first of all. A way to replicate and store information with self-replicating molecules, such as DNA and RNA. They would also need be able to have some type of compartmentalization to keep molecules concentrated together, as well as divide chemical environments and create energy gradients. Furthermore, they would need some type of metabolism, some type of biochemistry that carries out life and generates energy and facilitates molecular interactions. So some of the challenges to studying early life and the origins of life on early Earth is that there's just an incompleteness in what we have to study. There's no way to directly observe this process. We can't go back in time. So while the preservation of molecules may be possible as biosignatures, we talked about chemofossils in our last episode, very little rock from over 4 billion years ago still exists on Earth today. Most of that has been recycled through plate tectonics. We also have problems with contamination, so sampling the rock without either contaminating it with modern microbes or chemicals, or those found in adjacent rock, is very challenging. Dating is also a huge challenge. Rocks can be dated, but not always fossils, and therefore you really have to establish the relationship of the sample to the surrounding rock. As well, microbes and materials of biogenic origin can leach through porous materials or boring into older rock, really confounding the dating process and being a source of contamination as well. We also look at mimic biosignatures. So these are chemical processes that actually produce molecules that look the same as molecules that we would believe would only be produced by biological processes. So in summary of our lecture today, biological molecules are constructed of building blocks. The central dogma of biology shows that biological information flows from DNA into RNA, into proteins, which then create all of the other molecules for life. The panspermia hypothesis is that life arose on another planet and was transported to Earth. The abiogenesis hypothesis proposes that life arose on Earth from molecular building blocks, as by abiotic synthesis, gradually became more complex molecules. For life to have come about, a range of molecules would have been needed that could self-replicate and have some way to encode information, be capable of compartmentalization, and carry out metabolic reactions. Many different disciplines and diverse disciplines are involved in studying the origins of life on Earth. And some challenges to these studies include dating, contamination, and incompleteness. That's the end of it for now. Thank you.